Before I begin, I want to say thank you to everyone who took part in our poll on Paranormal Amino. The topic of this video was decided by you. Also, thank you to Amino for sponsoring this upload. Amino is one of the best places to connect with others who share your interests. The community-based app has many delectably eerie aminos for you to discover, such as horror. However, I personally enjoy Paranormal Amino. One of the most difficult things about researching the paranormal is that you can feel like the only person you know with an interest. The truth may be out there, just not around you. Paranormal Amino helps you connect with those who share your passion for the strange and spooky. On the featured feed, there are thought-provoking posts that have been shared by fellow users. You can also take part in polls, quizzes, and live chats, and see what's happening in real time. If you want to live chat about the paranormal, the app allows you to have conversations with people across the world. Here, you can share your paranormal experiences with others. After you've finished watching this video, I'd love it if you could take part in my poll on Paranormal Amino about whether or not you know someone who has been visited by the Grim Reaper. And with that, let us begin. Here is the video you chose. Death is incredibly difficult for many of us to cope with. The loss of a loved one, an indescribable agony. Contemplation of our own mortality, often simultaneously incomprehensible and terrifying. For centuries, mankind has searched for a means to make sense of the end of life. The Grim Reaper, or the Angel of Death as he is sometimes called, provides us with a tangible creature to embody the confounding concept of death. Yet, this entity is more than just a psychological coping mechanism. It is a being which has permeated folklore and beliefs across time and space. In some cases, there are even people who claim to have encountered the Grim Reaper themselves. The most common imagery associated with the Grim Reaper is that of a figure dressed in a long black cloak holding a scythe. A skeletal creature, the traditional Grim Reaper is death, able to cut down human life with his scythe as easily as he would harvest wheat. This ominous symbol of death can be traced back to 14th century Eurasia and one of the darkest periods in human history, the Black Death. The inexorable plague swept across the land, leaving piles of bodies in its wake. Whilst estimates of the death toll range wildly, some historians have suggested that as many as 60% of Europe's total population fell to the sickness. At a time of great misery, it was perhaps inevitable that death was personified in art and literature as a figure of terror. Swathed in black, the Grim Reaper lurked in shadows, waiting to reap his next unsuspecting victim. At the time of the Great Plague, death reigned as king. All peoples across Europe acknowledged and even drew inspiration from the overlordship of death. The Danse Macabre artistic movement was born in the centuries which followed. People from all classes would dance together with skeletal figures off to the afterlife in paintings, woodcuts, and plays. Contemporary poetry, including this verse which was directed at the Holy Roman Emperor, reinforced the reality that all would be reaped by death in time. Emperor, your sword won't help you out. Scepter and crown are worthless here. I've taken you by the hand, for you must come to my dance. The skeletal Grim Reaper was the great equalizer of medieval society. Looking beyond the traditional Grim Reaper figure, not all entities associated with death are quite as ominous. Some are merely performing a necessary task. According to texts of the Abrahamic religions, one of the angels of death is Azrael. Azrael is considered to be an angel of great and noble power, chosen by God to command many lesser-ranking angels, tasked with pulling souls out of bodies and transporting them through the journey of the afterlife. Far from having the power to cease life at will, Azrael is described as carrying out God's instructions by being the master of death, an immense and terrible beast which God created. When death was created by God, he, on account of his terrible power, had to be put in 70,000 chains of 1,000 years' journey's length each, and behind millions of barriers. When Azrael was placed in charge of him and saw him, he called the angels to look at him, and when he, at God's command, spread his wings over him and opened all his eyes, the angels fainted away and remained unconscious for 1,000 years. Azrael was given all the powers of the heavens to enable him to master death. According to religious literature, all the powers of the heavens made Azrael himself fearsome to behold. The angel of death is described as having 70,000 feet and 4,000 wings. His body is said to be covered with eyes and tongues, the same number as there are living beings on earth. When a living being dies, the corresponding eye bulges, plucked out by God's will. As the master of death, Azrael is said to know the time of every person's demise. 40 days before death, a leaf falls from the tree of life under the throne of God. The leaf comes to rest in the lap of Azrael, granting him knowledge of coming death. The angel is described as forever writing in a large book, and forever erasing what he writes. What he writes is the birth of man. What he erases is the name of the man at death. Death appearing as angelic beings are frequent experiences for those who are dying, according to retired American hospice nurse Trudy Harris. After years of experience working with the terminally ill, Harris found certain similarities amongst deathbed visitations. The angels were always described as more beautiful than they had ever imagined, 8 feet tall, male, and wearing a white for which there was no word. Luminescent is what each one said, like nothing they had ever seen before. Research into deathbed visions has found that nearly 76% of patients died within 10 minutes of their experience. The remaining percentage died within hours. One case of a visitation occurring immediately before death, reported by nurses, involved a girl aged 10 who died of pneumonia. The mother saw that her child seemed to be sinking and called us nurses. She said that the child had told her that she had just seen an angel who had taken her by the hand, and she was gone, died immediately. That just astounded us, because there was no sign of imminent death. She was so calm, serene, and so close to death. We were all concerned. Serenity during a visitation is not uncommon, even if the person is only moments away from passing away. Angel visitations can be as simple as someone pointing to a corner in the room and saying there is an angel before their demise. Equally, visitations can be more elaborate, with there being reports of angelic choirs performing a symphony for the dying, as well as beautiful visions of heaven as the angel shows the dying everything there is to come. These visions can last for more than an hour. Abrahamic angels of death like Azrael can be described as psychopomps, a word which in its original Greek form literally means guide of souls. It is the psychopomp's purpose to collect newly deceased souls and help them reach the afterlife. Generally speaking, these entities make no decision regarding who should die or when. Psychopomps appear in many different cultures. In the ancient Egyptian pantheon, it is Anubis, the jackal-headed god, who served many as their psychopomp to the afterlife. As the guardian of the scales, it was his job to oversee the weighing of the heart ceremony, which measured if the deceased person he was transporting was worthy enough to live an eternal life. In ancient Greece, the psychopomp took on a more terrifying aspect, in the form of the god Haron. 2 coins were required as payment to this unkempt and powerful god, who would mercilessly leave penniless souls to wither on the shores of the river Styx for 100 years. For those that could pay his price, he would allow them onto his boat and ferry them across the river from the world of the living to the dead. In Inuit mythology, the guide of souls is called Anguta. According to some tales, he is the ultimate creator god. In others, he is merely a mortal widower. However, the stories do agree that Anguta's function is to guide the souls of the newly deceased from the world of the living to Andulivan, a transitory realm where the dead prepare for their ascent to the ultimate paradise on the moon. If, however, the person has many sins to account for, Anguta serves an additional purpose: punishment. He is said to repeatedly hit their genitalia for however long is necessary for them to repent. According to the mythology, this process could take years. According to Chinese folk religion, there are 2 entities tasked with escorting souls to the realm of the dead. These twin death deities are depicted as dressing in black and white respectively. It is for this reason that their joint title translates into English as Black and White Impermanence. Individually, the white guard is known as Sipian and the black guard as Fan Wutio. The colours with which they are associated symbolize their functions. Sipian literally means definitely at peace, while Fan Wutio literally means cannot be helped. Depending upon how the deceased person lived their life, will determine which of these two psychopomps arrive to guide their soul to the underworld. In pre-colonial and present-day Filipino culture, ancestral spirits function as guides of souls. It is said that when the dying on their deathbed call out to a specific dead person, such as their deceased parents, their spirits become visible to the dying. Traditionally, the spirits wait at the foot of the deathbed, so that when death comes, they are ready to escort the soul of their loved one into the afterlife. The departing soul is delivered to the land of the dead by boat, where they are greeted by other deceased relatives. The idea of loved ones easing the passage to the realm of the dead is frequently reported across many cultures. Ginny Chapella, a senior coordinator of bereavement services at a hospice in Florida with over 20 years' experience, has described deathbed visitations as being so common I don't think much about them anymore. Indeed, staff at the hospice have got into the habit of referring to such experiences as the gathering of spirits. One of Chapella's earliest experiences of a gathering of spirits occurred while she was caring for a lady who was dying at home. About 5 days before her death, she reported seeing a man looking in the window. This was out in the country, and we were concerned that it was a peeping Tom. But when the man came back, she told us that it was her brother who had died many years earlier. "He's just waiting for me," she said. "I'll go with him the next time he comes." According to Chapella, these visitations make the dying process much easier for both the dying and the bereaved. Such deathbed visitations are much more common than sightings of angelic beings or indeed the traditional hooded Grim Reaper. Anecdotes of deathbed visions of deceased loved ones have appeared in literature and biographies for centuries, but it wasn't until the 1900s that the topic became the subject of scientific scrutiny. In 1977, Dr. Carlos Osis of the American Society for Psychical Research published a book titled At the Hour of Death. During his research in the years previous, Osis examined thousands of case studies and interviewed more than 1,000 doctors and nurses. After analysis of these testimonies, he was able to identify various consistencies found in deathbed visitations that are not easily explained. Far from reporting an array of awe-inspiring mythical beings, dying people generally reported being visited by people that they knew who had passed away, deceased family members and friends. These familiar people were described in believable terms, with the experiencers still aware of their real surroundings and conditions. From the perspective of medical professionals, they appeared lucid and did not seem to be hallucinating or in an altered state of consciousness. Most compelling, however, was how Osis observed that pre-existing beliefs were irrelevant. Whether or not the dying person believed in an afterlife, the experience and reactions were the same. Whilst Grim Reapers have been portrayed as a multitude of fantastical and fearsome creatures in folklore, real-life cases of the dying being visited at the moment of death are overwhelmingly personal in nature. Friends and family who have predeceased the dying person are often described as being present. These soothing encounters couldn't be more different from the imaginings which led to the creation of the hooded Grim Reaper of our medieval past. Until we ourselves are faced with a Death Reaper, however, we are forced to be left pondering that great and final mystery. In the final words of one dying man, who told his daughter that there was a loved one standing right there with her hands on his shoulders, "You can't see them, but someday you'll understand what it is like." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this and think that others may do too, be sure to share on social media. And if you cannot wait until my next video, why not check out another suggested on screen now.